Hey everybody, today I thought I would talk a little bit about how I was diagnosed, the process of it, what happened before I was diagnosed, and how the process did with during the diagnosis. So when I first started having symptoms of different variety of things, I had a lot of back in what was it 2000 and it was 9 years ago. So it was 2008. I started having a lot of symptoms. 2008, 2009. I started having a lot of symptoms where my joints were very stiff. They hurt. I had parts of my body going numb. I had a lot of tingling. I had migraines. I had stabbing pains behind my eye, this eye specifically. I had some dizzy spells. I had a lot of anxiety. I also experienced one time of my whole left leg from the hip down going paralyzed on me. And that was really scary. That actually took me to the doctors again. I was letting my dog out and I had an episode where I was going out my back door and all of a sudden I didn't have a left leg. It completely disappeared from my hip down. And luckily I had a wall and a refrigerator there and I just kind of grabbed onto that and then it just slowly came back and it lasted for hours after of just some weird feeling in my leg. So I had crazy symptoms for so long. And honestly, I had so many doctors, even, people around me going, Val, what's going on? Is really something going on here? I would go to the doctors. I saw maybe... I don't know. I saw a neurologist, gastroenterologist, rheumatologist, DOs, my primary. I had a few CAT scans. I had 10 MRIs. I had numerous blood work. I had an EEG. It just goes on and on. I even went to an MS clinic in Boston. That was interesting. I had a woman, she was actually a teaching student. And instead of ever even laying an eye on me, she came in the door and I was there for more symptoms because a lot of doctors told me I had MS, I most likely had MS. So I went to, of course, this MS clinic. And the first thing she said when she walked in the door was, she opened the door and she goes, "You do know this is all psychosomatic." First thing, and I'm just oh my God, here we go again. So she did some workup on me and checked things, didn't find anything. And then I had her, supervisor doctor or whoever he was come in. And he literally looked at me. At the time, it didn't sound right. I was actually really offended by it. But to this day, he was probably the only one that made sense. But he looked at me and he said, some things we just don't know. Some things we are just not familiar with and we're not sure of. Some things can end up turning up down the road. And he was actually right. At the time, I guess everything didn't come together. There wasn't scientific proof of anything. So it made sense. That made sense. So I went to another neurologist where I was from, and he told me to get up and start jumping up and down. And if I could jump up and down, everything was great. I refused to do that. I had another neurologist lady tell me my shoes weren't right. I wasn't wearing the right shoes. I had her tell me that my jeans, my pants were too tight, causing all this numbness. And I had my DO doctor tell me that I needed to work out more. I needed to do more cardiovascular type workouts, cardio workouts. And he told me that my leg went paralyzed because I had a migraine. So I heard everything under the sun. And I went to a psychologist. I was even sent to a psychologist to check to see if it was all in my head. And nope, none of it was. She didn't find anything wrong. She did say I had some post-traumatic stress disorder. We had a very, very hard death in the family, a child. And she thought, I definitely had some of that, which definitely I don't disagree with that. But nothing of my physical symptoms and everything was in my head. She couldn't find anything, to that degree. So I was told I had fibromyalgia. For 9 years, fibromyalgia. You have fibromyalgia, and they put me on gabapentin, which just put me to sleep at night, didn't do nothing for me during the day. I actually got very low blood pressure and I almost passed out many times from that. And I had to work out. I had to work out more and more and more. I never had my symptoms go away. So I ended up never getting diagnosed for anything in Massachusetts. I continued to have a lot of very severe symptoms. So I decided when I came out to Arizona, I had a friend of mine tell me that I really needed to get a Lyme test. And I told her, just like everyone says to me, oh, I had the Lyme test. Oh, it was negative. They always tested me for Lyme. They tested me for everything. I even had spinal taps, which was a horror. I'll tell you about that in another video. I had everything. I said, no. I said, no, it has nothing to do with that. So she goes, no, you have to go through a lab, which I mentioned to you guys in my first video, Igenics in California. It's specifically towards Lyme disease. The tests in doctor's offices, if any of you have had them and you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia or anything and doctors told you didn't have Lyme, you need to be checked again. It's a huge epidemic right now. And those tests, those ELISAs and Western blots, are 50% of the time false negatives. They're not accurate at all. At all. You have to have another test done. Igenics, and you can order a kit online. It's completely free to order the kit. It's about $175 for the full Lyme panel unless you have Medicare. But you could bring that the paperwork to your doctor, have them sign it off on it, and take your blood. You do $175. It's worth your health. And send it in. So I did just that. I actually found a Lyme literate doctor in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I am now living. And she had that test ordered for me. And 4 weeks later, I got it back. And I had 7 Lyme bands, which I told you in my first video, CDC positive for Lyme disease. 9 years, I had doctors tell me I never had Lyme disease. But I always had a band come up. I always had some in my paperwork I always looked at and I couldn't explain. And I kept saying, why is this in here? And doctors said, oh, we're not sure. You probably came in contact with something in the past. And I kept looking at this going, no, something's wrong. It was like my IgG antibodies. I